So hello everyone and welcome to today's virtual lunch and learn. You have the data, now what? In the spirit of reconciliation, DiUS acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, in case you haven't come across DiUS before, we're an Australian technology consultancy that specialises in using emerging technology to design, develop and deliver cutting-edge solutions. This includes our in-house expertise across digital, data and devices, and the convergence between all three. So in addition to our main presentation today, we'll also be having a panel discussion with two very special guests who will welcome you and introduce you to a bit later on. But in the meantime, feel free to ask questions. You can either jump on Slido using the code on screen or the QR code, or feel free to just put your questions in the chat feature of Zoom. Now, data and analytics at DiUS. It's obviously a space that has grown in significance over the past few years. Due in large fact because of the information age, unprecedented amount of data being collected from various sources, which can provide invaluable insights into things like customer behavior, market trends, and internal processes. This enables businesses to make more informed, data-driven decisions. But there's a whole lot of groundwork that needs to happen before you can harness the power and potential of data, not only in terms of the tools and platforms, but the approach required to implement and integrate data into the digital product development process. So we felt as though an interactive lunch and learn was the perfect forum to explore the current data landscape, the challenges and opportunities that exist, as well as what success looks like. So joining me today for our initial discussion is Nabi Rezvani, lead data engineer at DiUS. Nabi has an extensive software engineering experience background, and a natural aptitude for data and machine learning. His passion lies in designing high quality software that is scalable and fault tolerant, especially when it's data intensive. And we also have Gaurav Thadani, lead software engineer at DiUS. Gaurav is a software generalist with plenty of data and consulting experience, recognized for being versatile, picking up new tools and technologies, and driving value for our clients. So with that, I will hand over to Gaurav for his thoughts on the problem space.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Over the next maybe 20 minutes, Nabi and I will be talking through a bunch of things. I will be introducing you through a journey that organizations generally go through, and also a pattern that I observe more often. With this, I'll highlight problems and what is perhaps just a start to deal with them. I will then hand over to Nabi, who will talk you through product-led thinking before we jump onto a panel discussion. So, yeah. Cool. So we all have, we all know that organizations are generating a lot of data, and this is, in form of what business they carry forward, their functionality, but also what is the, there's also a lot of web and mobile data that's being generated. Now, these organizations are very keen to gather valuable insights from their data and harness various sources of data that they have. The more mature organizations have already on the data journey. They've invested in teams, hired specialists, and working through what they want to achieve with the data. But the younger ones are still looking for tools to solve their problem. But what problems are organizations actually trying to solve, and what are they trying to use the data for? At the very base level, you want to use your current and your historical data to identify trends and the relationships that these, that your business has had over the years, perhaps a product launch, and what was the impact on sales. So you want to identify trends and relationships. You then want to apply some form of statistical algorithms, or like do some functions on top of this data to predict the likelihood of future outcomes based on the data that you've collected. And also sometimes you may want to add your machine learning models. Sorry, I'm losing control of screen. Now I'm back. You want to apply, say, like, some machine learning techniques to make actionable recommendations based on this data. And this is what we refer to as the data science chasm. When organizations get onto this journey, they typically need to get the data in a certain shape, and that is key to achieving or to graduating through these levels. And being able to wrangle this data or reshaping them is what we define as data engineering. Now, this is a problem space that we are dealing with, that data engineering has not been very well defined. The rise of data in very large organizations and the technology to deal with this volumes of data is known as data engineering. The biggest problem that I see right now is that there is too much of focus on these technologies. So there's this portfolio of tools in this particular picture, and this is actually of 2012. And if you can see, it's a lot of tools to deal with data and the different nature of data. And I look at it, when I saw this picture first, it felt like I was being put into one of these garages with so many tools, and none of them that I'm very good at. And then how do I go, how do I deal with this? Fast forward to 2020. This is another image that I got off the internet, and it's an explosion of tools out there. There's so much vendor marketing with new terms and new words, and it's really, really hard to keep up with, let alone using them. To add to this, right, a lot of approaches and observed patterns have led to, like, how organizations are dealing with data at an organization level. And I'd like to just quickly touch upon some of these terms that I've heard or we use, just to give you, just for to make like a like demystify some of these terms. So yeah, a data lake, it's an organization gets onto the journey and says, and basically says that all data comes into a centralized large repository. It can store it in any format, often unprocessed and raw. And I've heard variations of this in terms of size. Some of them call it a data pool, a data ocean. I think they're quite similar in nature. The next one is a data warehouse, which is more of a layer that is used for analytics, to power your business intelligence tools. And these often hold structured or semi-structured data. The next one is the data lakehouse. It actually merges the best aspects of both the data lakes and the warehouse. And then Delta Lake. A Delta Lake is not, say, an approach, but it's an open source framework that enables building, it's a layer of compute over a data lake, and integrations with, bigger tools and technologies like Spark and Flink, stuff like that. The other two, the next two, Mesh and Fabric, are again different approaches to dealing with the data. Mesh being a very decentralized approach that organizations take, where managing your data there's a federated ownership of data, and also individual teams deal with governance of data. And a data fabric is, just a platform for managing organizations, building a platform for managing your data, regardless of where they live. So it's more like a standard or a prescribed approach where teams would publish data in a certain way or through certain integrations, so that you could, you could allow for integrations within an organization. But the point being, the explosion of tools, the different various approaches, I wonder if it's really something that teams starting on this journey should get into. When I hear so many terms and so many approaches, I wonder if there needs to be a more iterative manner than a very prescriptive manner. And it got me to, it reminded me of a quote I heard at YAO last year, where, where Randy Shoup said, if you don't regret your early technology decisions, you probably over-engineered. So I wonder if, picking up all these tools or approaches really solves the problem that you need. So now, how do we solve the problem though? And I think, understanding what you want to achieve, what is your business problem is the main. And Nabi will talk about it a little bit more when I hand over to him. But I am now going to talk about how or what aspects or dimensions should one consider when they're even getting started on the data engineering journey. Yeah, so taking a few steps back, right? Like, we know organizations generate data, and this data is actually stored in a database. Now, how did we get to choosing a database? And these are some of the dimensions that we may all have analyzed to some degree. When we were choosing a particular storage for our application, scalability, can it perform? Can it, can the data be secured and consistent where I store it? What is the cost of the storage? And is there a healthy community around it? But the key aspect of all is the customer or the problem or the business goal that we are trying to solve towards. And even these dimensions are typically assessed in context of solving that customer problem. I think, as an analogy, I'm using this to identify what are the dimensions that we should analyze when choosing or when getting onto the data engineering journey. And these are the ones that just some of them to highlight or think about. So what are the business objectives, and does it align with the organization's business goals and objectives? Strategy, how will data be collected, processed, and stored? What is the existing technology or infrastructure that the organization already has to deal with data? Is it flexible? Can it scale? And these are some of the things that we need to start thinking about. Integration. We have multiple teams, perhaps different domains, and how are they going to integrate with each other? It could also be external integration. Storage, what is an appropriate way to persist all of this information? Different dimensions that you may want to evaluate are volume, velocity, time of, what's the freshness that this data needs to be used? How would you like your teams to collaborate within the organization? Another one, which is governance and compliance, are very much around how do you want to deal with the data and the nature of this data. Does it need to be GDPR compliant? Do you need to be PCI compliant? And then the last two are pretty much process, people, and how you want to invest in talent, uplifting people's skills, and then continuously improving your data engineering practice. So just to summarize, I think given the number of tools and approaches that we have seen, there's been so much shift picking tools or knowing specific technologies. And we're trying to just mention that maybe the focus should be on a problem or a business and not the tool itself. Lastly, before I hand over to Nabi, I'd like to remind everyone that when we choose to make decisions as an organization or an individual, a lot of it comes from intuition. And as an organization, actually, sometimes our decisions go well, sometimes they may not. But as an organization, we know now we have the data, and we can harness this data to help getting to decisions along with intuition. To add to that, with some domain expertise, you can harness your data and empower your decisions to be very data informed. So this is just a reminder of where the data is going to be used and how organizations are planning to deal with it. I will now hand over to Nabi.
Thank you very much, Gaurav. Good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Nabi. I'll be presenting my section of the talk today about product thinking towards data. Now, this section kind of complements Gaurav's section and his discussion on the explosion of tools problem. Okay. So with each and every data initiative, we basically can look through two different lenses. So there is the technology lens and there is the product lens. So with the technology lens, you normally talk about and think about aspects that technologists like me very much like. So things like data architectures and infrastructures, data processing, data visualization, data pipelines, data governance, so on and so forth. So this is the technology lens, whereas there is a different lens as well. So we can look at a data initiative through the product lens, and that's when we ask different problems and we focus on different things, aspects like data-led decision-making, adding business value using data products, measuring success using data, and predicting patterns using data. Now, as a quick disclaimer, so I'm not a product manager. I'm just sharing my experience as a data engineer, a technologist that has worked closely with data engineers. With product managers. Okay, now with that product lens in mind, we can apply this framework that's maybe familiar to you. It's a very simple yet very effective framework in my mind, and that is the why, what, and how framework. So when we want to build any product, it can be a software product or even a data product, we can apply this framework. And the idea is that with this concentric circle, so you want to start from the core and from the innermost circle being the why, and then move your way towards the outer layers, which are the why and how. So we want to play that out with an example, assuming that we're talking about an e-commerce website as an example. So the leaders of the organization are asking themselves, okay, so we don't have visibility on the best-selling products. If we did have that kind of visibility, it would allow us to run marketing campaigns and up our sales. Now, this is the why, the business driver, and then the next step is basically coming up with a product specification, defining the what, which is basically defining the functional and non-functional requirements and identifying the actors. And only then we can start thinking about the how, which is about the tools that we want to utilize and how we want to build this thing. So one other thing that I wanted to mention here is the thin slice approach. Again, this is something that you may have heard before, or you may have applied before as well. The thin slice approach basically is talking about different layers of complexity when dealing with technology ecosystems, or more specifically in this case, an ecosystem of data tools and services. So if you want to build that kind of ecosystem, you're dealing with different layers of complexity. So starting from the bottom, so there is storage. You think about how you want to store the data, then you move on to the processing layer, then the data governance layer, and then the presentation layer through APIs and dashboards and so on and so forth. Now, the idea is that in each layer, you're dealing with different components and different tools that can kind of satisfy the requirements or address complexities in each layer. But we don't want to build this whole ecosystem of products, this whole ecosystem of basically tools and services to cater for the requirements that are not our actual requirements yet. We only want to build as much as needed based on the data product that we are actually building. So basically building in each layer and in each component as needed to cater for our requirements. Now, let's talk about a few case studies. So the first case study that I want to talk about is the experience that I had with an organization. We call it Organization X here. So we engaged with this organization to do a bit of data engineering work with them. And as we learned more and more about this organization and the history behind the data platform that they had built, we realized that they had invested for almost 3 years into building this data platform. Initially, the motivation behind building the data platform and the drivers were some really good non-functional requirements, like we want the platform to be self-served, we want it to be scalable, we wanted to allow discoverability of the data, and we wanted to allow performant data processing. However, these were just non-functional requirements. So if you want to think about the process that the organization went through to build and roll out this data platform, so they started with the planning, basically planning around the non-functional requirements that I mentioned, which are really, really good. But we will talk about like how this can lead to not so much successful practice. So the next step was to build based on these non-functional requirements in mind. So lots and lots of tools and technologies were used as part of building this data platform. Pretty much each and every technology that you could think of was had a footprint in the ecosystem. And not only that, some of the modern basically techniques for data engineering, like data mesh, were also followed as well. And then the rollout step, which was when the data platform was ready, the verticals of the business were asked to kind of ingest lots and lots of data that they were dealing with into the data platform. So the organization invested a lot in building this data platform, and yet the data platform didn't have many users. It wasn't being used extensively, and no business value was being kind of gained out of the huge investment made into building the platform. So the first project that we started working on with Organization X was we have bought a data warehouse product, let's integrate it into the platform. And the motivation was that the reason why the data platform does not have a lot of interest from the verticals of the business and is not being used much, it may be because of the usability issue. So let's bring in another tool, being a data warehouse. Let's integrate it and hope that it actually improves things. Again, going back to the initial issue that we raised, since the focus was not on solving a business problem, fixing or addressing a non-functional requirement didn't help much. And then a product leader, a product manager came on board and started shifting things towards actually solving business problems by getting the whole team to work on the annual recurring revenue problem, which is normally a very important problem for subscription-based business models, which was the case for this organization as well. And it helps with being able to predict the revenue, and then that is a good metric to kind of gauge the sales and marketing campaigns. And then we observed that things were kind of like starting to change and improve. The business verticals were happier, the leadership was happier, and even the team which was working on the platform was much happier, feeling that they were actually adding value to the business. Now, so the second case study is about Powersensor. Now, to give you a bit of context about Powersensor, it is actually a startup which offers a self-installed energy measurement product, and that in turn enables households to monitor their energy consumption and helps them basically measure and kind of optimize their energy and solar consumption and generation. Now, with Powersensor, we were in a situation where there was a lot of data coming from the devices, the CRM, lots and lots of data from different sources, and there was no data capabilities built to kind of harness the power of this data and kind of add some value to the business using the data. So we started the data journey by asking the questions completely driven by business outcomes. So we started asking ourselves, okay, so if we have more visibility on the installation of the devices and the installation performance, we would be able to have, insights on how the sales pipeline is performing and how the partners are performing on their sales metrics, and the partners are basically the agents which were performing the sales. So we wanted to have a quicker kind of metric to measure the sales success. So the second question was, if we have the data that shows the fleet view of the devices and shows the fleet view of things like battery and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi performance, we would be able to make informed product roadmap decisions. So in case the product is not performing well in terms of the Bluetooth and battery, we will be able to change that by making changes to the product. And also in terms of the energy data that the devices were measuring, we thought about, if we have that data, we may be able to build product features that kind of help in building features that can help with gaining more insights to energy consumption patterns. Okay, so if you look at the process, it was a bit different. It was more iterative. So we started with planning. We created a backlog of tasks, shaped a product roadmap. Then we prioritized into multiple phases, then defined the functional and non-functional requirements. And then we followed an iterative process for each phase, doing research, building, rolling out, and then ducking and diving and adjusting the tools and the technology behind the product and what was actually backing the product, which was completely driven by the business outcome and the functional and non-functional requirements. So we weren't really building anything, and we weren't over-engineering for the sake of it. Everything was driven by the business outcome and the requirements. And this is an example of a conversation or a brainstorming session between the product manager and the data engineer. So at some point we had to make a decision and do a trade-off between latency and cost. So as we were receiving the data constantly, we could build a streaming solution for bringing in the fleet view data of the Bluetooth and batteries. But then we realized that that could become prohibitively expensive, and we didn't really have that requirement as a priority. So the focus was on being able to have insights on the fleet view data, so we could live with a bit of latency, and that allowed us to be able to build this product with much lower cost, which was more pragmatic for a startup like Powersensor, which didn't have the budget to make a huge investment in building costly real-time and streaming pipelines like this. So we went for a batch solution, built something that was serving the purpose but wasn't over-engineered. So just to do a recap, so with Powersensor, we started off with no data capabilities, focused on the business outcomes. We did build thin vertical slices in each phase, adjusted the technology pieces that we built based on the requirements, try to keep the cost low as well by doing a trade-off between latency and cost. Again, what we were following was the business outcome and what we want to get out of the product that we were building. By doing a bit of trade-off, we could keep the cost low, add a lot of value to the business, and build something pragmatic. All right, thank you very much. With that, let's jump into the panel discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Nabi, and thanks, Gaurav. Some awesome insights as always. So yeah, as Nabi said, we'll now kick off our panel discussion. And we're very pleased to welcome along Jonathan Gomez and John Sullivan. They're very happy to use the names of JG and Sully to avoid any confusion. So Jonathan Gomez, JG, is head of data platforms at Wesfarmers OneDigital OnePass. He's an experienced technology and data leader and problem solver across both startup and enterprise environments. He's extremely passionate about bringing product thinking to data and tech, automating all of the things and finding ways to reduce time to market, time to value, and time to insight. And then John Sullivan, CEO at ChargeFox. He's got a track record of leading organizational and digital transformation in senior leadership roles at AWS, Qantas, MYOB, Census, and Bright. As CEO of ChargeFox, which is a product-led technology company that operates the nation's largest and fastest growing open charging network for modern EVs. So JG and Sully, welcome along. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries. So I think let's, I know we've got a lot of questions coming through and we'll endeavour to answer as many of them as possible. But I might just start off with you, JG, if you can just give us a bit of info about Wesfarmers OneDigital, your role there, and yeah, your data journey to date.
Yeah, awesome. So Wesfarmers, most people are familiar with the company, but maybe not the full breadth of the brands. So Bunnings, Kmart, Target, Catch, Officeworks, we've acquired Priceline as well. So we've got a pretty big retail footprint. So OneDigital was basically, it's comprised of 3 different business units. So we've got a data business unit that works closely with OnePass. I'm part of the OnePass business unit, and catch.com.au is now part of OneDigital as well. So it was basically formed around the desire to build that direct, close relationship with the customer. And I'll probably get into that in a bit more. And my role is very much focused on creating that analytical data capability. So being able to enable the teams to solve BI problems, data sharing, and starting on that journey of advanced analytics.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I might just move on to you, Sully. Can you just give us a brief overview of the importance of data at ChargeFox and how it informs the decision-making process?
Yeah, sure. Like, I'm a bit of a strange CEO. Most of my team will say, yeah, he's strange anyway, but you'd really look at me as not a sort of a balance sheet CEO. I come from a tech background. I'm more of a like a startup founder style of CEO. I joined the company 6 months ago, and it's a hugely successful company. It's growing, exponentially growing. Like, we double all of our metrics every 6 months. Like, the number of users double, number of cars, number of chargers, number of charging sessions, all those things just double every month. Mainly because the market of EVs is just growing as rapidly as it is, and secondly, that we're a great company. But my role in here when I joined was like, let's get a product roadmap for next financial year, which started this month in July. And what I found in the company is that we had to date sort of made a lot of decisions based off gut instincts. We use words like, I think I would like this, or I reckon this is how I use a charger, or I do this, or I hypothesize, or we think we do this. And to me, that's just not good enough running a company like that. So the data journey for us was really about getting a whole bunch of data that we've got access to and using it to really describe the way where we should place our bets. We're a small company, can't do everything at the same time. We've got 101 things we could do, probably only the ability of moving in 3 physical directions of the company at the same time. So our plan today was we worked with DiUS to basically take all of the information we had and put it into a platform on QuickSight, which we can then just do some sort of descriptive analytics of where we currently are to inform decisions we make for how we should move products. And we're sort of at that stage at the moment. Yeah, and so it's been a bit of an interesting journey. It's like, you can read all the stuff that, you know, all the literature that the guys have gone through prior to this, and it's really, for me, is first thing is that every company is going to have data. The technology side of things is just the least important. Like, it's strange coming from a guy from Amazon and running all the architecture groups in for ISVs in Amazon, but technology is the least important thing for you. The first thing to do is really work out what insights you want, and then start looking at the data you've got. And if spreadsheets are good enough, use spreadsheets, for God's sake. And then once you've got data, then work out how technology can enhance what you can do with that data. Yeah, so I think that's basically where we are at the moment. I'm at this bit about just plotting all the information we've got, making informed decisions, so that it's like hypothesis. Every time someone comes to me with a question like, we'd like to go and do this, I go, well, what, you know, when you have this thing in market, when it's successful, what does it do? What metric does it move? What will measure with the measurement of success? And then before we build anything, we build stuff now that measures the current state of something, and then so we can measure what the end result of something is. And if it works, then we'll keep it. If it fails, then like, having run tech companies for quite a long time, I actually want to get the teams to start deleting code, deleting features. If they're not successful, I'm not going to leave them in the product. I'm going to get them ripped out, so I don't have to maintain them. So, quick whirlwind tour. That's us. Me.
No, fantastic. And yeah, I think that what you were saying, yeah, obviously resonates with what Gaurav and Nabi were trying to get across, is, yeah, lead with the problem and let everything inform there. So yeah, fantastic. one of my other questions that I had planned, and it kind of feeds into one we've had from the audience. I might go to you, JG, with this one. Is how do you get started on a data journey? So obviously at Wesfarmers, a lot of different brands, a lot of data sources. What's the first step that you have to take in the data and analytics space?
Yeah, so I reckon this is a really interesting one for us because there has been so much complexity. So it was probably about 4 years ago, so well before I joined, the concept of let's get all the data in one place, start to analyze it, let's start to do something with it. That was, you could say, a corporate direction that was sort of started on. So there was originally an advanced analytics center that was established. There was, you could say, a requirement for the brands to share that their relevant, say, transactional data, behavioral data with that division. And I guess you could describe it as, there's many good things that came out of that and potential that was demonstrated, but there were also some challenges. So one is around if you're not focused on what are you going to do with it, and you might hit roadblocks later. So from a pure privacy perspective, consent is so important. Just collecting data because you can, but not necessarily being laser focused on what you're doing. Do you have the right to do that? And that's probably what I'd say led to a rethink on how to really solve that problem across Wesfarmers. And that would sort of take us into this second horizon of the data journey, which was where really OnePass was born. So it was this idea that we need a direct to consumer interface. As part of signing up, you're actually capturing that consent explicitly. Obviously, the value proposition of OnePass, just for those who might not be aware, currently it's an Amazon Prime-like experience. So it's free delivery for your online orders. There's a lot more planned, a lot more coming, but in its essence at the moment, it's a subscription program where you're getting free delivery. That's not really a data play. That's you could say, your foundations to be able to start a data play. And what I would describe as right now is that, third horizon where we're starting to connect the dots and looking forward around, okay, now that we've got an expanding customer base, now that we're sitting on a lot of data, what do we do with it? We're sort of moving into that phase. So I'd probably describe some of the background as, when you've got, 6 large independent retailers that operate as their own companies, just getting anything off the ground with that scale is quite difficult and time consuming. And, I think it always helps to have the use case in mind.
Yeah, no, 100%. Any other thoughts on that question on the panel, on how you could get started in the data and analytics space?
I'll give you a contrary approach, which is, it's the beauty of having a panel of 2 people that they can at least throw things at different angles.
That's it, definitely.
I'm not looking to centralize any data. I think that's personally, I think that's not the right approach. There's so many tools out there today that can read distributed and diverse data, but there comes a whole bunch of challenges when you actually pull it in and store that data. Like you're the custodians of it and managers of it to the point that JG talked about before, like the security of it. Then you've got to go and look at the latest security breaches, and then, and every time you store a bit of data, your risk profile, surface space increases. So we looked at data, and I look at data differently. Like I've got lots of data that we generate and we store to make the system function, but I've got probably just as much access to information which is external to our systems, which if I took a centralization approach, I would pull that in and then use it for analytics purposes. I just at the moment do the opposite, which is leave it where it is, analyze, aggregate, and then come up with results. But I use information from diverse places and leave it where it is, and it sends somebody else's security issue to deal with. If I anonymize it and aggregate it, I don't have to worry about it. So I'd always say that centralize the analytics, don't necessarily, data ownership is not really like it used to be when you first did data, that you had to centralize everything, and ownership of data was your keys to millions of dollars, have petabytes of data, make millions, that kind of thing. And I think now that there's tools that can just aggregate it from elsewhere. And so to me, it's like centralize the analytics and the analytics part of it, but don't worry too much about owning it. If it takes you a bit longer to generate a result and information and insights, don't worry about it. You're probably better off doing that than getting caught short when someone breaks into your systems and steals everybody else's user ID and password for a third-party organization that you're working with, and then suddenly you're on the hook for millions of dollars of ransomware. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say go the contrary of it. Like, don't store it if you don't have to. And like from a security point of view with data, like the best thing to do is audit your data and get rid of as much. Don't store it. The more data you store, the bigger the threat profile you've got and surface space you've got with data. So best approach to security on it is, just don't store it. Like if you collect it to validate someone, like we had this at Bright, where we would validate the identity of someone, and the standard approach is to keep that piece of data which you use to validate someone's identity and store it. And then when I went in there as a CTO, the first thing I did is said, no, you need to store the fact that you have validated, then delete all of the data, just remove it all. So you should never have their driver's license, never have passports, never have birth certificates, never any of that. None of that data, just delete it. Get rid of it. But the thing you're interested in is, did you have the data at the point when you validated it? So authenticate, make sure that's happened, but get rid of data. So to me, I'd go the opposite way and say centralize analytics, don't centralize data. And if you can get away with not storing it, and then you can reproduce it or get hold of it when you need it for analytics purpose. My opinion is that's a better approach and a safer approach for organizations.
Yeah, excellent. So there you go, two different perspectives, centralized or not, for how you can get started. Thanks, guys. So one of the other questions we've had come in, and I might stick with you if that's okay, Sully, as we're going down the product-led path. What product management techniques would you recommend that companies adopt in their data journey? Don't know if there's been anything that's been particularly successful over at ChargeFox or elsewhere in your career.
Better, not successful, the right word. But like, there's a couple of things that people don't, in my experience, haven't done. Like I've always run roles in product-led companies. And so I've always worked either as a tech leader next to a product leader, or basically been the joint of product and tech, so CTPO sort of style of roles. Done all of those pretty much all of my career. The biggest thing I find is that people bring personal biases into decisions on making products, and that the thing I've tried to do at least over the last few roles is, if someone says we're going to go and do something, just go why, and then try and find the data point that's trying to be moved, or the data points that are trying to be moved. So I just think that the first part of product management is get the data, get access to data that will prove whether this thing's good or this thing's bad. The other thing I'd suggest is that when people do, no one really, in my experience, not many people experiment. Like they don't really care. Like they have an idea they're going to do something, and it better work or it doesn't work. It's not an experiment. They're not after the data to decide what to do next. So I've tried that in product companies as well. Do a lot of things with our group here to say, well, let's just see what measures move, and then we can use those measurements to make the final decision what we do next. And that'll be another thing we've done as a product group. And then the other thing is, the first thing I now get on features that are built here is build a dashboard with the results before you build the feature. So it's like this, the product or the data-led thing to, like, is it DTD or DDD, data-led development rather than test-driven development? Do you know what I mean? It's like build the test first, and then look at it. It should be red. Then run the thing. When you do the piece of work, you're never going to get the result at the end of the work. you've got to let it run for a period of time to get, you know, if it's a customer facing thing, it's got to be used by customers and everything else, and you've got to get that data. But build a dashboard, build the thing that tells you it's successful or not, then build the thing that makes it work, then leave it in market, then go and test to see if it works. And then the final bit, which I haven't really done here yet, is when it doesn't work, take it out. Just basically find that branch of code, delete it. Just delete it or archive it. I still believe today that code is, people look at, because it's created, people just hold on to code too much. And I actually think code's written to be deleted. Like somewhere in the future, a good developer will basically write code, not that it can be amended and modified, so people can write it. So at some point, the next piece of code they write should delete the previous version. If your surface space of code gets smaller, then you've got a system that can move very nimbly. So, but you can't do that unless you've got the data to decide whether something's used or not used. Is it successful? Is it not successful? So build a dashboard or build something first.
Yeah, awesome. Any more thoughts from the panel on that one?
Yeah, I just had one. I was like, when working with data, the only thing I've always liked or learned is do it in production. Every other environment is not valuable.
Read-only copy of production.
Read-only copy of production.
Read-only copy of production.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Put the caveat on it.
That's right.
Oh yeah, what does that delete? What does that delete command do? Oh, I don't know. Delete star from, I don't know, select star from dictionary star. But, no data. Not so great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So a bit conscious of time, but hopefully we can get a couple more questions in. I might go to you, JG, with this one. How do you balance the explore aspect of data analytics with the exploit aspects? So meaning balance between new data sources, new innovation versus just dashboarding it.
Oops. Yeah, cool. I think in terms of like where OnePass is at, we've probably been, I'll describe it as in that product market fit stage of a company lifecycle. So despite being in a large enterprise, we're a small business unit, and I'd probably describe it as, you know, how do you tell if your product is successful? You know, you survey users, you understand market share, how are people reacting to it? The ability to, I would say, iterate on our product feature when we're integrated across, you know, 5 different brands, as an example, is quite challenging. So we have been probably more on the measure to understand journey at the moment. Like I would probably describe it in our current phase, and less on the, you know, let's act, let's do something with that. There is a lot of thinking about what should we do, you know, and even just beyond the understanding the customer, should we be just asking the customer questions as opposed to doing advanced analytics? So I guess the call out would be, you know, where we are on our journey. We're more about understanding what's been happening, and I think there's a lot of appetite for doing more.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that one? The explore versus exploit?
I can add a little bit here as well. So we do a lot of machine learning at DiUS, and you know, a popular approach that we use, which I think is working really well for us, is the POC framework, known to everyone, I think. So basically, to kind of mitigate the risk of, you know, building something and then realizing that it doesn't work, we invest a little bit of money and time and effort into just testing out an idea. So obviously we need to make sure that you know, we can justify the business objective behind you know, a machine learning model if you want to build it. And then we do a POC, you know, quick and low cost, making sure that it works. If it works, if everyone is happy with it, then we roll it out and we productionize it. Basically, this is something that we've been following a lot, and it's been working for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Nabi. Any other thoughts on that one?
Well, I've got one on date on. It's probably not right across the board, right? But one of the things I'm doing at the moment, I'm dashboarding what I think are the key metrics of the company, and I don't really know what insights I know the insights I'm getting from it. But what I'm doing next is basically making that data available to everyone in the company, and then wider in the group of companies, and then saying, what do you want to know more about? Like, what do you see when you get there? Like, ask other people what insights they want. Because I think if you ask other people, like, we can proof of concept and we can do, trial and ask customers and stuff like that, but there's a lot of knowledge inside the company itself if you ask the questions the right way. So one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment is get data into a form, put it out in front of people and just say, hey, here you go. Like, why is the data like it is? What do you see in it? What more would you want to know? What would help you in your job? And trying to get more insights internally by asking questions internally. And then ultimately, there are certain bits of key data that we're just going to, like in our market, there's a concept of like availability and service levels of chargers. And there's no industry standard for it whatsoever. So basically, all of the charge point operators, the people that run charging infrastructure, will say they've got the most reliable network, or theirs is up 98% and stuff. But there's no data backing it. They're just putting these random statements out. So what we're doing next is we're going to take the data that we've got, push it out in public, and say, here's our SLAs. This is the metrics it moves to. Anyone else that comments on SLAs, then you need to basically, like, happy to open source this and for you to put your data in it, happy for you to contribute your information, and we'll share it with you. Do you know what I mean? So we're trying to basically change things by making data more public, and then from that, I assume two things will happen. One is, in the latter case, we'll get the other charge point operators to stop saying that their sites are the most reliable in the world, because they're not. But or they'll start improving, or they'll basically, we'll get a whole bunch of questions from the public, which will help frame what we do and what the other industry has to do. So I think, to me, it's like free data in some respects, and ask lots of questions about it. Me start off with, do it internally, ask lots of people what they need for their job and what they see in this and what would they like to see more of, then go external with it and do the same thing to people as well. It's like, go out to the public, ask them, what data do you want? Do you want to know how long people charge a car for? Do you want to know how much money someone makes from a charger? So you can stop moaning at them for having a charger not working for a period of time if they're losing money hand over fist on the charger in the location. Like, so, do you know what I mean? It's like we're trying to put information out as much as we can. And that's what I'd say to people is, put data out, ask lots of questions internally, put data externally and ask people. Don't put information out as if it's authoritarian. So put it out and say, what do you see in this? And get feedback from them as to what they want to see next. And you'll probably get some, I'm hoping I'll get some really good ideas of where to go next with data. Like, what do I, and then I can build the right technology solution to sort of handle that. Because, first stage at the moment with us at the moment, I've built a centralized analytics platform. Next, it's about, well, I need to get probably a more like a proper lake and more data and stuff like that, and proper tools in to help me out in the future. But first, ask what people want.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, that means it's 1:30, so that means that we'll have to wrap things up on the Data Lunch Learn. Apologies if we didn't get round to answering your question, but please reach out and we'll endeavour to respond. But I'd just like to thank our presenters, Gaurav and Nabi, as well as our panelists, JG and Sully. Lots of lessons and insights today. And yeah, it's very much appreciated. So thank you, guys. Thanks everyone for joining us. And yeah, that's it for today.
Awesome.
Thanks.